Let me start with an invocation and get into the subject. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Can you hear me?
Yes.
At the back also?
Maybe a little louder.
Little louder?
Just a little closer.
All right. Now?
Perfect.
Now.
Thank you.
And since we are a small group here, what I propose to do is, I'll talk about something today. Luckily for me, Lalita ji left it open. She just said spiritual talk. So I'm free to choose what I'm going to talk about. And then because we are a small and close group today, we can interact more at the end of the talk. How do I interact with the time? Okay, the time is there.
And the mic is not working.
Or if you want to...
Mic is not working. Doesn't seem
Somehow...
to. Oh, I've got, no, there's no plug there. I can
that's
keep back with it.
See if I can
Increase it a little bit. So what I propose to speak about today is from one of the root texts of the Vedanta, the Taittiriya Upanishad. You see, the essence of Vedanta is very simple. Vedanta, you know, is the core philosophy of Hinduism. It's based on very ancient texts called the Upanishads. There are different interpretations of Vedanta. The one we are using is Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta. The essence of Advaita Vedanta is very simple. It says that if we know ourselves as we truly are, our problems would be at an end. Our true nature is existence, consciousness, bliss, and infinite existence, consciousness, bliss, Satchidananda, that's the term that is used. Now the thing is, we don't know that. We don't feel it. We are like, suppose your rich uncle or somebody leaves you $1 million, or in these days maybe 10 million would be better. And so you're a multimillionaire, but you're still on welfare, and somebody asks you, what happened? I know I've got $10 million, but I don't know which bank it is in, I don't know how to access it. So yes, I am a multimillionaire, but I can't use any of it. We are like that, somewhat like that. Vedanta says you are one with God. Your real nature is not this body and mind. You are existence, consciousness, bliss, an infinite, an immortal spirit. And it just words to us. So the whole question is, how can we access it? How do we know where the $10 million is, and how can we get it and use it for our lives? So Vedanta says you have to know yourself as you truly are. And Vedanta shows us techniques for this. How do we realize that we are existence, consciousness, bliss? One of these techniques is in the Taittiriya Upanishad, and that's what we will look at today. So we have a very specific agenda this afternoon. One technique from the Taittiriya Upanishad which helps us to realize what Vedanta says we are. Different Upanishads give different methods. In the Taittiriya Upanishad, in the second chapter, you find a method called Pancha Kosha Viveka, the analysis of the 5 sheets of the human personality. Basically, the story so far, it's connected to the talk I gave on Thursday. But if you haven't heard that, don't worry. It's you can hear this as a standalone. In that talk, basically the sum and substance of that talk was our real nature is infinite existence and consciousness. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Now the question remains, if that is so, how do I really feel it? How do I know it? How does it become a reality for me? Contrast it with conventional ideas of God and religion. In a dualistic religious framework, we are told that there is something called God, somebody called God. If you ask where, oh, God is in heaven, not here. When can I experience God? Well, maybe after death. If you're particularly nice but not naughty, you get to go to heaven and you meet God. Now that's a safe approach, because if somebody asks, why can't I see God here? Well, God isn't here, God is in heaven. Why can't I see God now? Well, God is not now. You have to wait until you go to that place and then only. So not here, there, not now, then. But Vedanta says, here and now, all the time, our real nature is always present. Here, now, and it's you. But this raises a question that if it is right now, I am this immortal spirit which Vedanta speaks about, and right here, then why don't I know it? Vedanta gives us these methods of, let us call them pointing out, taking us step by step and showing us what we are. Right now the big problem is, not that we do not know that we are Brahman or whatever, it's that we are pretty convinced about what we are. If you say, you are Brahman or you are existence, consciousness, place, I don't understand any of that. I am me, I am this person. So Vedanta, like a very good teacher, begins where we are, takes us by the hand from where we are and takes us to where we are supposed to go. So there's a golden rule of teaching, from the known to the unknown, from the near to the far, from what is to what shall be. So a good teacher always takes the student step by step from what is familiar to what is to be taught. So this method which Vedanta is going to use now is exactly like that. It starts off in a very innocuous way, in a very simple way, very commonsensical way, but very soon it becomes very interesting and very deep. So let's go on this journey. It's not an external journey in space, it's not a journey in time from now to then. It's a journey from ignorance to knowledge, from something that we do not know to something that we should know about ourselves. So now you're now like, okay, we are sold, get on with it. The Upanishad says, who do you think you are? What do you think you are? And our first reaction is, well, this. Do you think you are this body? As good a place to begin as any? Yes, I think I am this. So the Upanishad takes it up. The Upanishad has a particular name for the body. The Sanskrit word annamaya, a modification of matter. Modification, literally a modification of food. Something which is built up physical matter, built out of food. Annamaya. The maya in Sanskrit has two connotations. One is something that is pervaded. Something that is pervaded by food. So this body is pervaded by food. Or something that is an effect, transformation of food. Which stands to reason, because it's what we eat and drink that goes to make this body, that is assimilated into this body. So are we this body? Seems to be a given. Yes, we are this body. And the Upanishad also says, all right, let's begin there. It says, Annamaya Atma. Atma, the word in the Upanishad means the self, you. So what are you? The food self, the physical body which is a transformation of food. Now, the Upanishad says, take a closer look. This body, it changes. In fact, in traditional Sanskrit literature, you'll come across 6 changes which are supposed to apply to the body. First is jayate, it's born. It wasn't there earlier, separately at least, it's born. Jayate. And having been born, it comes into existence, which might be a peculiar way of putting it, but it stands to reason. It was not there earlier, now it has come into existence. So birth and coming into being, jayate, asti. Then third is vardhate, develops. It develops. So there was this, I have an assistant here. She said that she's not a baby. She was a baby and then she's a toddler, now she's a kid. So that is called vardhate. It grows, it develops. And then it matures. Viparinamate. It reaches a state of maturation, say by middle age. One doctor said, we don't say this outright, but physiologists know this. When you hit 40, after that it's all the way down. Afterwards. I remember I was not seeing right, and I thought something wrong with my eyes. I went to show the doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh, there's something seriously wrong with you." I said, "What?" "You have hit 40. So after 40, you're going to need the glasses." Apakshiyate. That means it begins to deteriorate. It degenerates. It ages. No matter how much exercise you do and eat gluten-free and whatever, ultimately it's going to run down. And then nashyate. It dies. So six transformations, and they are inevitable in the body. Born, coming into existence, and developing, and maturing, and then degenerating, and then finally falling apart. Notice one thing, that you get the feeling that I am the person who was the young person, and I was the teenager, and before that I was a little kid, and before that presumably I was a toddler or a baby. Maybe I don't have memories, but surely I was. That means I am the same person who was in these wildly different bodies. The bodies look so different. Take your own baby pictures and your great kindergarten pictures and your pictures now. You see so much difference. And yet you say, I was that person. And I am this person now. So the body changes so much. Just last week I was in Santa Barbara. We have a convent there where the nuns stay. And one of the nuns, she said to me that a friend of hers pointed out to me some mutual acquaintances and said, "Look at them, they've gotten so old." And this nun said to her friend, "We have become old also." And her friend said, "No, we are not old, they have become old." But pointing to a psychological truth, we think that the body ages, but we feel more or less the same. And the same nun, who is very humorous, she said to me, once I was walking past a shop window, and I looked into the window and I thought, for a moment I thought, who's that old lady? Because I don't think of myself as this old lady. So time passes so fast, and we see the changes, and we feel we are the same person. This sense, if you dwell on it, I have a sense of being unchanging, and the body is clearly changing. I, whatever I am, the Atman, the self, I have this intuition of being the same. And the body changes so much. The changing and the unchanging, how can they be the same? It's more reasonable to say I am embodied in a changing body. And that's how most adults look at themselves. We are this person, the body changes and ages, but we are this person in this body. We have a sense of being embodied, but not literally this body. This is one way of looking at it, one argument. Upanishad, Vedanta gives you several arguments. Mostly they're not found in the original Upanishad. They're found in the commentaries, Shankaracharya's commentary and so on. Let's look at another argument. What you experience is an object of your experience. And you are the subject. Right now, for example, you are looking at this hall and you're seeing so many things here, including this and all of this. And whatever you see is different from your eyes. It has to be. The eyes can only see things which are different from them. Isn't that true? In fact, the only things that eyes cannot see are the eyes themselves. Right? The limit of our vision is not there. It's here. Because your limit of your vision can be extended much further. You get telescopes, you can see almost infinitely far away. But the eyes cannot see themselves. So whatever the eyes see are different from them. The seer and the seen are usually different. Now look at your own body. Is it an object of experience? Can you see it? Yeah. Can you touch it? You can actually see it, touch it, smell it, taste it. All sense organs work on this body. This body is an object for all your sense organs. You are the experiencer, seer in within quotes, the experiencer, and the body is experienced. Clearly you can see that. Now the experiencer and the experienced are different. You cannot be the body, because the body is something that is experienced. But this is the second point I'm making, second argument. One more. There are many such arguments. I can give you more later on if you ask. The third argument to show that you cannot be the body is this. It's subtle but powerful. You are aware of the body. Consciousness is on your side and it's not on the side of the body. You are something which is conscious of the body. And the body is an object of your consciousness. The second argument was seer and seeing. The third argument is sentient and insentient. You are conscious and the body is not conscious. There is a psychologist in New York, Greg Good. He has written books on Vedanta also. He's very interested in Vedanta. He gave a very simple experiment to demonstrate this. He said, just look at your hand. When I look at my hand, what is the nature of the experience I'm having? If you look at it internally, phenomenologically, internally, the experience is clearly, I am conscious of my hand. It's not that my hand is conscious of me. That would be weird and scary. The hand says, hello. No, I am conscious of the hand. Clearly, the hand is something that whatever I am aware of it. So what's the point? What is true of this hand is also true of this hand and is true of every part of my body. Which means I am something which is conscious of the body. The body is not conscious of me. Consciousness is on my side, not on the side of the body. 3 arguments to show what? That I cannot be the body. What are the 3 arguments? The body changes clearly, I do not change. In Sanskrit, parinami and nitya. The second argument is the body is an object of experience, I am the experiencer. Drishya and drashta in Sanskrit. And the third one is the body is insentient, in Sanskrit jada, and I am obviously conscious. Sentient, in Sanskrit chit. So because of these 3 reasons, parinami and nitya, drishya and drashta, jada and chit, because of these reasons, I cannot be the body. You know how you use these arguments? First, assimilate these arguments. Like, what are they saying exactly? Once you are convinced it makes some sense, then next, try to feel it actually. Actually and experience, see it. Not a logical argument, not just a philosophical point, but an intimate experience. Yes, I see it. It is a thing. I am something which is experiencing it, literally. So it's not exactly me. In this way, we begin to get the feeling, I cannot be the body. I must be something other than the body. In the body, surely. And sure enough, the Upanishad says, you're right, you're not the body. The Upanishad, you see what a gentle teacher it is. First it said, yes, you're the body. But let's take a closer look. Now that you begin to feel, I'm not exactly the body. What am I? The Upanishad says, where do you feel you are? Outside or inside? Inside. All right. You are something inside the body. You're not the body, but you are something inside the body, right? Yeah, makes sense. In Sanskrit, pratyak, inside. And you're something subtler than the body. Not a physical thing like the body, but something subtler than the body. Sukshma, subtle. You are somewhere in there and subtler than that physical body. What is there which is inner to the physical body and subtler than the physical body? The Upanishad says, gives it for our consideration. What about prana, life forces? The Sanskrit word prana stands for all the physiological processes which go on in this body. They are controlled by an energy called prana. That was the ancient way of looking at it. Systems like Ayurveda, for example, they follow this system. The Chinese call it chi, and the Japanese call it ki, prana, life forces. Now remember, one clarification here. When it says inside the body, it does not mean physically inside the body. Because you could just insert a tube here, or a doctor could cut it open, and what you would see is more body. You would just see blood and flesh and bone, not inside in that sense, in a subtler sense. That it's something, life processes, biological processes are not an organ in the body, but that which keeps the body together, which nourishes the body and keeps it alive. So that's prana. And the Upanishad says, or the Vedanta says here, since you are not the body, you are something inside the body, subtler than the body, then the body becomes like a covering body. Are you with me? Body becomes like a covering inside which I am. And this covering in Sanskrit is called kosha. Kosha means a sheath, something which covers. Now, look at the transition. First, we started with Annamaya Atma. food self, the physical body is the self. Now we feel, no, I am not the body. I am something inside the body. The body is like a sheath, kosha. So now it is called Annamaya Kosha, the food sheath. Something deeper inside, the prana. So am I this life force? According to Vedanta or Indian systems basically, it is this life force which manifests in most obviously in breathing. In yoga, one of the stages is pranayama, control of the prana. Literally what we do is control the breathing. But basically you're trying to control the prana with the help of the breathing. So pranayama, prana it controls breathing, it controls the flow of blood in our body, it controls the hunger and thirst and digestion of food and assimilation of the food into the body and all biological processes up to and including the death of this physical body. So that is prana. In fact, in many Indian languages, most Indian languages I think, you know how you say a person is dead? You say pran nikal gaye, or the prana has left. That's the way we put it. The life has, even in English we say, the life has gone out of him. So prana is this life force. Am I the prana? Am I life force in this body? We apply the same three arguments. You will immediately see the same arguments apply here. Does the life force change? Yes, it does. Sometimes I'm hungry, the moment I eat, I don't feel hungry anymore. Sometimes I feel sick, sometimes I feel healthy. Health and sickness, energy and tiredness, alertness and dullness, and hunger, thirst, breathing in and breathing out. All of these are changes in the prana. It has different components and they act in different ways. So the prana changes, and yet, here's a subtle point. That I am the same person who was hungry a little while ago, and then I ate, and now I'm not hungry anymore. I'm the same person who was full and satiated. I'm the same person who was hungry. The prana was manifesting as hunger, and now the prana is manifesting as satiety. The prana was manifesting as tiredness, and then you have a cup of coffee, and now the prana is manifesting as energy. So the prana keeps changing, like the surging of the tides in the sea. The prana keeps changing. And I am the unchanging experiencer of the changing prana. The changing and the unchanging, they cannot be the same. Same argument. Parinami and Nitya. Then the second argument, is the prana an object of your knowledge? Can you observe the prana in action? Yes, you can. In fact, there's a whole school of meditation which is very popular in the United States now. You all have heard of it. Mindfulness. And the first thing that they do is you sit quietly and then follow your breath. They'll ask you to watch the in-breath and the out-breath. Meaning thereby, what Vedanta is interested in is you can actually observe the breath. You can feel the sensations of the breathing. Prana is something that is observable. It is something whose effects are observable. Not only the breathing, other things are also observable. So it's in something that is an object of your knowledge. And you are the knower. Drashta, drishya. The two cannot be the same. And the third one, are you aware of the prana or is the prana aware of you? When you are watching the in-breath going in, you are aware of the in-breath. It's not that the breath is aware of you. So, I am the unchanging self and the prana is continuously changing. Argument one. I am the witness of the prana, the drashta, and the prana is drishya, an object of my knowledge. I am sentient and the prana is insentient. In that case, how can they be the same? How can the unchanging I be the changing prana? How can the observer I be the observed prana? How can the sentient I be the insentient prana? Because of these reasons, I am not the prana. And the Upanishad, gentle teacher, it says, yeah, you're not the prana. You are something subtler and inward. Pratyak sukshma, something subtler and inward to the prana. And the prana now becomes like a sheath, a covering. It's called the pranamaya kosha. That covers who? Covers you, the real you. You are something within that. Within, again, not in a physical sense, in the sense of being subtler than that. What's subtler than the prana? When you look inward, could it be the mind am I the mind? Thoughts, ideas, feelings, memories, this person? Here we come to the idea of the self, which is most common to most grown-up people, most adults. They consider themselves, how do we look at ourselves? As a person in this body. That's how we normally look at ourselves. And that's what the Upanishad says. Yeah, what about the mind? Are you the mind? Manas. Upanishad calls it Manomaya Atma. The self is now the mind. We're going step by step. First it was the body, then it was the prana, now it is the mind. So are you the mind? Are you this person? Because basically what we consider the person to be is our personality, my likes and dislikes, my memory, this person that I am, distinguished from all other persons. My uniqueness. And all of this is in the mind. So prove it, it's in the mind. Well, one interesting proof is that when you fall asleep, which is always a hazard in a Vedanta talk. When you fall asleep, deep sleep, when you're not even dreaming, where is the personality then? It's gone, right? That person with its unique likes and dislikes and memories and desires, hopes and fears, that person is just gone for that time being. That means when the mind functions, the person is there. When the mind doesn't function, the person is not there. So am I this person? That seems to be the answer. Yeah, I'm a mind with prana and a body. Again, apply those three. That inexorable logic. Changing and unchanging. Does the mind change? You say, oh boy, does it change? It changes so fast. How many thousands of thoughts do we have throughout the day? How many times since the morning till now have you been happy, irritated, expectant, bored, curious, desiring something, relaxed, anxious? So many times, so many thoughts, continuously changing and fluctuating. And yet you're the same person who woke up in the morning and who's sitting here now. You think of yourself as an unchanging entity, and the mind changes continuously. Changing and unchanging. Parinami and Nitya cannot be the same. Second, can you observe your mind? Do you know your own mind? Answer is also yes. There is a word in English for this, introspection. Look inside. When you say, I'm happy, what do you mean? You have happy feelings. When you say, I'm anxious, what do you mean? You have anxiety, you feel it. That means you do know the contents of your own mind. We do know what's in our minds. Sometimes we don't pay attention. When we pay attention is I'm introspecting into my own mind. The contents of the mind are known, drishya. They are seen, within quotes, seen. And you are the drashta, the seer. And the seer and the seen cannot be the same. This is something deep, because we normally stop with the mind. Now Vedanta comes and says you are not even the mind. You're not the body. You're not even the mind. You're there somewhere, but you're not the mind. And again, very remarkable. This is where I think Vedanta has a lot to contribute to modern consciousness studies. Because whatever the mind is, modern consciousness studies would say that the mind is conscious, if nothing else. Or you can talk about a subconscious mind, but certainly you do talk about a conscious mind. Vedanta says no, even the mind is not conscious. It shines with the light of consciousness, but it in itself is not conscious. Can you prove it? Very simple. Right now, just think a simple thought like, I think my name is Swami Sarvapriyanda, or simple, 2 plus 2 is 4, just think it. The 2 plus 2 is 4 is a thought. Were you aware of the thought, or was 2 plus 2, 4 aware of you? Very clearly you were aware of 2 plus 2, 4. That 2 plus 2, 4 is not aware of you as a person, as a thinker. So you are the thinker and the thought is an object. It is insentient. You are consciousness. The thought is an object of consciousness. Chit, jada. The two cannot be the same. Now we are on very subtle grounds. Even the mind is a sheath. Think of it as a covering, a very subtle covering. It's a bit like those Russian dolls, the nesting dolls, the big doll, and you open the smaller doll, and you open the little doll. Similarly, we're going deeper. Even the mind, consider it as a sheath. Come on in, this space, come. So mind is a sheath which covers the real you. The Vedanta calls it the Manomaya Kosha. Kosha means sheath. Manomaya Kosha. Now here, what Vedanta does is, it makes a slight distinction between different functions of the mind. We have two words for it, mind and intellect. And in Vedanta it is called manas and buddhi. What would be the difference? Different thoughts which come up, memories which are dredged up, they are all in the mind. We have different words in Vedanta for it, chitta, manas. Buddhi, intellect, in Vedanta, the definition is nishchayatmika buddhi, that which gives you clear knowledge. It's like when you're working on a math problem or a puzzle, you're trying to solve it. That's the mind churning away at it. And when we finally get it, yes, got it. That moment of enlightenment, that moment of clarity, that is buddhi, intellect. They are basically two functions of the same entity. But considering the buddhi separately, Vedanta says, are you the intelligence, the intellect? Right now, for example, we are using that intellect trying to understand this. So that faculty within us, which is trying to understand all of this, that intelligence, are we intelligence? Are we the intellect? Vedanta calls this Vijnanamaya Atma, the cognitive self, that I, the one who understands, who is reasoning, Vijnanamaya Atma. Again, apply those three arguments. By now you must have memorized them. Changing and unchanging. Yeah, come on. Changing and unchanging. Does the intellect change? Clearly. From lack of comprehension to sudden comprehension, and also to forgetting, and then I had understood it, but now I'm confused again. That's the intellect. It changes. Can you observe the intellect in action? Can you be the seer and you can see the intellect functioning? Yes. You can feel it inside if you introspect. Working hard to understand something. If you're a researcher or even a kid working away at your math problem, you can see the intellect working. Clearly it's happening. It's a kind of cognitive event. So it's also drishya, an object to be seen. Not a physical object like this, a mental object, a subtle object. And you are the drashta, the experiencer of the intellect working. The third one, do you remember? Chit jada, sentient and insentient, conscious and not non-conscious. Normally think that the intellect is conscious, but again, it is something which is an object of consciousness. When you get a flash of understanding, it's you, whatever you are, who's got the flash of understanding. It's not that the intellect, that flash of understanding knows you. You know that flash of understanding. It's clearly on the other side of consciousness, and you are aware of it. By this process also, you refine your understanding of what is meant by consciousness in Vedanta. You are not the intellect. It is not Vijnanamaya Atma. In Sanskrit, Vijnanamaya Atma means the self, which is the cognitive self. No, even the intellect is a sheath, a covering. So it's called Vijnanamaya Kosha. Once you eliminate the intellect and the mind, basically what you're saying is that we are not the person we thought we were. The person is there in the mind and the intellect. And I was also amazed to discover that the word person has come from the Greek persona. It seems in ancient Greece, when they would stage plays in an open auditorium, theater, amphitheater, this thing was not there. So they had big masks with openings in them through which they would speak. Sona means sound. So persona means through which they would speak. But they were basically big masks. And each actor would come out on stage with the mask of the character he was playing. So personality actually means a mask. It's not you. What you think your personality to be, you are not the person. It's like a mask we wear. We are not the intellect either. The intellect becomes Vijnanamaya Kosha, a sheath. How many sheaths have we got so far? The Annamaya, the physical body. Subtler than that, inward to that, the Pranamaya, the vital body, the vital sheath, Prana. Subtler than that, inward to that, the mental sheath, Manomaya. Subtler than that, interior to that, Vijnanamaya, the intellect sheath. Now we have got 4. Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, Manomaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha. 4. And yet there's something deeper than that. If you probe deeply beyond that, sort of introspect and try to see what lies beyond the intellect, this intellect which we are using right now, try to see what lies beyond that, you will just run up against a blank wall. Nothing. Try it now, you'll see. What's beyond this? I am trying to understand it. This faculty of understanding beyond that, what's there? You just hit a blank wall, a kind of nothingness. This is similar to what we experience in deep sleep. And the Vedanta sort of goes on and on about the deep sleep experience. That blankness, that darkness, that not knowingness which you have if you try to see what's beyond the mind, that is called the Anandamaya, the blissful sheath or the blissful self. Why is not knowing called blissful? Well, I guess we have this phrase in English, ignorance is bliss. Maybe, I don't know. But it is what we experience in deep sleep, and it is very restorative, it is relaxing. When you come out of it, you feel at peace and relaxed. So maybe that's why it's called Anandamaya. And there are deeper reasons to that in Vedanta philosophy. But let's just say, if you try to probe beyond the intellect, you come to a blankness that is called the Anandamaya. Is that who I am? The final nothingness, a kind of blankness, not knowingness? No. That also comes and goes after all. And that is also an object of experience, right? You experience it. And you are the one who went into deep sleep, the conscious entity, and you are the one who can consciously reflect back upon deep sleep. You are conscious, that thing is not conscious. Because of those reasons, that thing, that blankness also cannot be our real nature. So that Anandamaya is also dismissed as a sheath, a covering. So we are at the deepest part of that Russian nesting doll. And what you expect, what the student expects at this point is, it was pointed out that we are existence, consciousness, bliss, and I'm going to show you that you are your existence, consciousness, bliss. Let's call it the pure consciousness. So you are this pure consciousness, pure spirit. So you expect the teacher to pull out that final thing and show you that here you are. That's the real you. But at this point, having dismissed the 5 coverings as coverings, they're coverings. The real you is covered by these 5 coverings. The real you is interior to that and subtler than that. Having said that, now when you are expecting the answer, who am I? Tell me, show me. The teacher keeps quiet. The teacher keeps quiet, doesn't say anything. And at this point, the student gets a doubt. So is it nothing? Is it like peeling an onion? You peel up the skin layer by layer and then there's nothing left. So there's no self. And the teacher says, the beautiful Sanskrit, asanneva sabhavati, asan brahma iti vedache. You, if you think that real self is not there, then you don't exist. But you do exist. You are there. Here, to understand what's going on at this point, a story becomes very useful. Story is not just a story. This story is the key to the whole mystery. Because we searched here, step by step, and we didn't find who we were. We don't seem to have come to any conclusion. The 5 sheets are actually very simple to note right now. None of them are theoretical. One teacher put it very simply. I raise my hand like this. This thing which you see coming up, this is what sheet is it? Annamaya, the food sheet. And the energy I expend in raising this hand, that is the pranamaya. This thought that I am now moving my hand, this inner experience I'm having, that's the manomaya. And the decision I took, I'm going to raise my hand. The decision is the intellect. Vijnanamaya. And the Anandamaya also means the bliss sheet, so it's a different way of looking at it, but that's also there. If there is any happiness associated with raising the hand, it comes from there. You might ask, what happiness is there in raising a hand? You should go to a physiotherapy unit where people finally manage to raise their hand after being paralyzed or something and see the happiness there. Anyway, those are the 5 sheets. You can actually locate them in your experience. But then what am I? What am I there? I just said, I am not any of those five. Here is the story, and the story is all important. The story is like this. It's an old Indian story, well known in India, of the 10 friends who crossed a river. So they crossed a river on their way somewhere, and after crossing the river, one of them thought, has everybody crossed, or did somebody drown? Let me count. So one of them counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, that can't be right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh my God, the 10th person is drowned. Our 10th friend is dead, is drowned. And the others say, you're counting wrong, let me count. And then each of them count, and they find only 9 people. So they think that the 10th person is drowned. And they sit down and cry and wail until the archetypical, the wise person walks past and says, why are you crying, my friends? Oh, sir, we were 10 friends and we crossed the river and our poor friend drowned. How do you know he drowned? We counted. And that guy must have counted and seen that there were 10 people. He said, don't cry. The 10th person is there. Don't cry. Where? Believe me, he's there. This is an important stage where you don't know where the 10th person is. You don't know whether God exists or you are this existence, consciousness, bliss. But the teacher comes or the guru comes and the text comes and tells you, it's there. Wait, I'll show you. They go like, where is this 10th person? I'll show you. Show us. And the guru said, the teacher, who's the wise person, says, count and show me how you counted. He counted. No, humor me, show me, count again. And they line up, and one of them starts counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I told you 9. And that wise man comes and catches his hand and turns it towards him and says, Dashamastvamasi, thou art the 10th. 10. This man says, wow, 10. Let me try. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, the 10th person has been found. What joy! And the others say, let me try. And they all try. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Oh my God, the 10th person has been found. Now, funny and silly as the story may seem, we are doing exactly the same mistake. When we are trying to locate, who am I? There is an answer to that. But just like that person did not count himself and counted only the others, we are doing exactly that. How? How does this work? Like this. Tell me why that person couldn't find the 10th person. Person was counting. Why couldn't he find the 10th person?
He was only looking at the outside, all the others.
He was looking only at the outside, not at himself. So he was counting those on the outside. Now let me ask you a more subtle question. Why was he looking outside? Why didn't he count himself?
Sensor.
Because
He's seeing what?
the scene. Where did he find the other 9? Outside, correct. He found the other 9 outside. And the tendency is, okay, 9 people are there, the 10th also must be there. He's not there, therefore the 10th person is drowned. You see, what happens is, our tendency is to look for an object, a thing. Maybe a very subtle thing, not a physical thing. Maybe a physiological thing, maybe a mental thing, maybe an intellectual thing, maybe a concept, maybe something, but a thing nevertheless. And why are we looking for things? Because all our life we have been used to objects. Our entirety of knowledge is, I am the subject, I'm looking for an object. But when you are inquiring for yourself, the pure subject, that won't do. It is true that everything else is an object, but you are not an object. You have to do that. What? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What did he do? He made that turn. Now, because he's a person, he can make the turn and catch himself, I am the 10th. Here, the turn has to be in understanding. You have to locate the 5. The Upanishad, the Vedanta helps us by taking us step by step from the outer to the inner, from the more gross to the subtler, till we are at the last object. And the subject is you. You have to catch this yourself. How do you do that? You follow this method. In your experience, phenomenologically. There's a word phenomenologically, like what it seems to you, like in your experience. Not just conceptually. Now conceptually the groundwork has been laid. Now we have to make that turn like this in your understanding. And we'll try it now. Let's see, some of us may become enlightened, who knows, on this day. Or at least you get an idea of what is involved in this. That turn, how do you make that turn? We will go step by step, not just in concept, not just as a theory, but actually feeling it. And at that point, I will ask you to make that turn and see what happens. Let's start with the outermost. This is called Arundhati Nyaya in Sanskrit. What it means is using something gross to point out something physical to point out something subtle to point out something even more subtle. The reference is to a ritual performed in a wedding. It seems, I don't know if it's really performed in weddings nowadays. It is? Okay, that's good to know because I didn't know that earlier. One of the rituals performed in an Indian wedding is that the bride is shown a very faint star called Arundhati in the night sky. It's just a ritual. The bride is shown that. But to show this girl that star, you can't just point there because there's so many stars out there. So what they do is, look at the branch of this tree, that branch pointing out into the night sky. Okay, that's not Arundhati. And then just above the branch, do you see that bright star? Yes. And just below that bright star, do you see a fainter star? Yes. And just to the left of that faint star, a really, really faint star. Yeah, I guess so. That's Arundhati. Step by step, subtler to subtler to subtler, it makes it easy to catch. If you directly point it out, it'll be either a mistaken thing or you just won't get it. Okay. So that's what the Upanishad does. Start with the most obvious. Let's do that. Remember, not in theory, actually in your feelings, in your experience right now. Let's see what happens. Annamaya, the food sheath, the body. Are you experiencing it here? Okay? Not theory, right? It's right there. Okay? Now you breathe in and out. The sensation you have inside, that's part of the pranamaya, the vital sheath. Again, not theory, not speculation. Absolutely, right now, right here. We wouldn't be alive if that was not happening. Inner pranamaya. It's also a sheath. It's not me. Neither the body nor the breath. This observing, this thinking which is going on, that is the manomaya, the mind. Thoughts in the mind, usually expressed as images or words. They are thoughts in the mind. Manomaya. That's also not me, because I observe it. It's not me. Clearly. Again, no theory, practically, right now. Then go deeper. This thing which is going on now, consciously, this is the intellect. This cognitive process of trying to understand. That is also an observed entity, a changing entity, an insentient entity, not me. Beyond that, probe. Just a blankness. The one which is observing that blankness. You can't catch it as an object. Whatever you catch as an object is an object. To it, the real I. If that is confusing, if you lose track, start with the body again. Clench and unclench your fists. Annamaya. Breathe in and out. Subtler. Pranamaya. This thinking going on in the mind. Manomaya. Faculty of understanding which I'm using for all of this. Vijnanamaya. Go further, blank, Anandamaya. All of these five shine in what light? That light I am, that light of consciousness. eyes. Before I end, I will make some observations here, not mine. These are from a medieval text by Vidyaranya. The text is called Panchadashi. So in chapter 3 of that text, it's called Panchakosha Viveka. Vidyaranya uses this, the interior text, and makes a few very, very deep observations. I'll share 3 of these observations with you. First of all, the real self, that pure consciousness, it is not an object. In that there is a verse in the Panchadashi, the chapter 3, that a person, maybe a student, asks the question, we have examined the human personality, starting from the physical body to the bliss sheath, from the Annamaya up to the Anandamaya. We have examined it and we have rejected it, that it's not me. It's something that I'm aware of, but it's not me. It may be associated with me, but it's not me. We have rejected it. And yet, other than these 5, there is nothing else. Other than these 5, there is nothing else. Exactly like, other than those 9, there is no other 10th. Where is the 10th? So where is the self? Where is the real self? And there Vidyaranya makes his first important observation. The real self is not apparent, not because it does not exist. It's not apparent because it is not an object. You are looking for an object. You will never find it as an object. But that does not mean it does not exist. It is there. It is the knower or the experiencer of the 5 sheets. And through the 5 sheets, it is the knower and experiencer of the entire world. That's observation 1. Not because of non-existence. It's just because it is not objective. That's why you don't experience it. The second observation is very interesting. The moment we get an understanding, okay, the real self is there, it's not an object, it is me, the pure subject, it's like the 10th person, it's not like the 9 persons. Alright, I get it. Immediate, our tendency will be, okay, I sort of understand what you're saying. Now, how do I experience that? Forgetting that the very question, how do I experience that, is again objectifying. Right? And Vidyaranya gives a very beautiful example there. He says, consider this example of sweetening something. Something is sweetened by adding sugar. So there's water, it doesn't taste sweet, but if you add sugar, it tastes sweet. It's an invisible something which is added to it, which changes its taste, makes it sweet. Milk doesn't taste sweet by itself maybe, but if you add sugar to it, it tastes sweet. An invisible something that is added which pervades it and makes it taste sweet. You can't see it, but it's there. So whatever you add sugar to make it taste sweet, you have to add sugar to it. Now the question he asks is, what do you have to add to sugar to make it taste sweet? Remember, the rule has been established. To make something sweet, you have to add sugar. Now to sugar, what do you have to add to make it sweet? Your answer will be,
It's already sweet.
it's already sweet. Sugar, the rule does not apply to sugar. Sugar lends its own intrinsic sweetness to others. And it by itself does not require any addition. It's intrinsically sweet. In exactly the same way, it's a good example. Consciousness is that which gives us experiences of everything. You want to experience this world, this thing here? You need eyes, of course. You need a mind, of course. But you need consciousness. You need to be aware. If you're aware with a mind and with your eyes and body, you can experience this world. You need consciousness to experience this world. You want to experience the body, you need to be aware of the body. You need consciousness. You want to experience the mind, you need to be conscious of the mind. The word mindful is a bit of a misnomer. Mind is always full. But mindful means being conscious of your mind, the contents of your mind. Paying attention. Now, what do you need to add? You need to add consciousness to have an experience of anything, X, Y, Z. Now, let me ask you the question. What do you need to add to consciousness to have an experience of consciousness itself? Just like sugar, exactly. Just like sugar, you need not add anything extra to consciousness to have an experience of consciousness. Consciousness is self-luminous. The example that's often given in Vedanta is light. So light, the room is dark, all of these things you cannot see. Switch on the light, you can see all of these things in the room now. The light illumines all these things. Now what do you need to illumine the light? Nothing. The light illumines itself and other things. A luminous object illumines itself first and then reveals non-luminous objects. Similarly, consciousness reveals itself first, I am, and then reveals everything else. Descartes, the famous French philosopher, mathematician, he had this experiment that let me doubt whatever I can doubt. The great, experiment in skepticism. Let me doubt whatever I can doubt, and then finally come to something that is indubitable, and on that indubitable ground build up whole epistemology and metaphysics again. All of knowledge can be built on sure grounds, which cannot be doubted. And we know, what did he finally end up with? That cogito ergo sum, that I cannot doubt that I am thinking, that these thoughts are there. These thoughts cannot be doubted, because thoughts are appearing. World outside can be doubted. Am I dreaming? It could be I'm dreaming. It could be I didn't come to the temple. I might be sleeping, having a nap, and dreaming that I'm listening to a Vedanta talk. But that I have thoughts in the mind, it cannot be doubted. So, because I think, therefore I am. That was his conclusion. Vedanta will go one step further. We'll say that I am, therefore I think. There's this funny little joke I read once in, there's a magazine, there's a journal of philosophy, the most prestigious journal of philosophy is Mind. It's published from, I think, Cambridge or Oxford, something. And once, they had a whole issue, which was just jokes. But at first it won't look like jokes. It's just all the articles and papers, they're all meant to be humorous actually, not meant to be serious articles in philosophy. So there was a joke about Descartes. He goes to this Parisian cafe and orders coffee. And the waitress comes and says, Monsieur Descartes, do you want another cup? Descartes says, I think not. And he disappeared. I think therefore I am. Consciousness does not require anything else for its experience. Because note that consciousness cannot be experienced as an object. But as a subject, it is ever revealing itself. Vivekananda put it this way. Consciousness in itself does not become an object of experience, but you should not go away thinking that the self as consciousness is unknown. Rather, it is the most known of all things. First, it is known, and then everything else is known by its light. The Upanishads have very beautiful language, Kathopanishad, Mundokopanishad. That shining, everything else shines. By its light, everything is lit up. Tameva bhantam manubhati sarvam, tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. Very poetic. That shining means what? You shining. Everything else shines. What do you mean by everything else? Everything in your life shines. By what light? By you the light. Not your light, by you the light. You shine forth and everything is illuminated. That's the second point he makes. This we are talking about Vidyaranya. One last point, and that's humorous. Last point he makes is humorous. You see, it's like this. All this time you've been talking about a permanent self and a changing body, mind, and so on and so forth. If you have read up on philosophy, the first objection will be, but the Buddhists say that there is no permanent self. The strongest, the greatest difference between the Hindu approach and the Buddhist approach, between the Vedantic approach and the Buddhist approach, is the no-self theory versus the self theory. Anatma theory by Atma theory, this thing. So, what does Vidyaranya reply to that? One of the Buddhist schools is Shunyavada, Madhyamaka Buddhism, which says that there is no real permanent self, it's an illusion, the self is void. Shunyam means void. Vidyaranya's answer is humorous there. To understand that, we must note that in ancient Indian debates, you had two sides. In Sanskrit, they were called Vadi and Prativadi. Vadi is the person who defends a thesis, and Prativadi is the one who attacks that thesis. So now here the Vedantin is defending the thesis that there is a permanent consciousness which is a self. And the Buddhist school of voidness, emptiness, is attacking it, saying that there is no such thing. There is no such permanent self, it's all empty. So the debate goes on between the dependent and the challenger. So in this context, Vidyarany's answer, he's just being sort of tongue-in-cheek humorous. He says, so there is no self. And the challenger says, no, it's empty, there is no self. In which case you are not there, you don't exist. And therefore, if you don't exist, I do not have an opponent. Why should I reply to anybody? Who do I reply to? Because you're not there anyway. But there's a deeper point involved here. I'll make that point at the end. One of the definitions, one of the pointers to this real self in the Upanishads, very famous, is called neti neti. Not this, not this. The two not this, the two negations, have what they do is they serve this purpose. First, not this is, no object is the real self. So, for example, it's not the body, not the prana, not the mind, not the intellect, not the anandamaya. No object is the real self. First neti. And at this point, the great problem becomes, in that case, the real self is not there. There's no such thing. Again, neti, not that either. It is not what you think it is, and it's also not that it does not exist. So the two netis have this interpretation. They're different interpretations. This is one interpretation. The two greatest problems we face, and you will continue facing until enlightenment, is either we take an object to be myself, a very subtle object, intellect, an object to be myself, or if I am able to dismiss all objects, I think that I don't exist. Either an object or nothing. Neither of them is the answer. If you can transcend both of them, you arrive at what you truly are. I was once at an interfaith conference in India, and there were these lamas, Buddhist lamas, sent by the Dalai Lama, a group of them, and they didn't speak English, not much Hindi. One of those lamas spoke a little bit of Hindi. He acted as an interpreter. So we were sitting for breakfast, and we were having this debate. I knew that they would ask me. So they asked this, at breakfast they asked this question. Tell us about the Atman. And I went, uh-oh, because I know their position. So I started with the more positive descriptions of the self in the Upanishads. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma, infinite existence, consciousness is Brahman. And they went, that Lama translated into Tibetan. And their teacher, he replied, and the reply was, no, this is not acceptable. If you say Satchidananda Atma, existence, consciousness, place, no, it's not acceptable. And I thought I have to change my track, this won't work. So I said, another way of looking at it is neti neti, not this, not this. And I explained it. And they're very sharp, they're very philosophically trained. So that was translated to them. And they went into like a football, they go into a huddle before the match. And the lamas went into a huddle and they excitedly talked among each other in Tibetan. And then they turned with beaming faces, and the one who was translating into Hindi for me, he said, our teacher says you can be a good Buddhist, you come over to our side. That's what I wanted to say today. I'll end it here and throw it open for comments, questions. Yes.
Thank you, Swamiji, for another great talk. My question was, you brought up mindfulness and meditation. So all forms of meditation, whether you're observing the breath or whether you're observing the silence, ultimately point to the knower of what you're doing in meditation, right? And so you need the knowledge in addition to the techniques. Because if you just keep breathing or if you just keep observing the silence, then you're getting attached to the object.
Right.
You need the Vedantic knowledge to point to the knower.
Right. You are a well-trained non-dualist. That's why you said this. The usual form of the question is just the opposite. It would be like, what's the point of all this talking? Just do a meditation and you will realize yourself as the Atman. That is the view of Patanjali Yoga, where, the Yoga Sutras, where the idea is Yoga Chitta-vritti Nirodha. Yoga is cessation of the modifications of the mind. What happens when the mind settles down? Tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. There the witness self is appreciated in its real nature. It stays in its real nature. Because otherwise, the fourth sutra says, vritti sarupya mitratra. If the mind is active, the real self, consciousness, gets mixed up with the movements of the mind. Anger, I am angry. It seems natural, I am angry. But Vedanta says you are not angry. You are consciousness illumining anger in your mind, a movement of anger in your mind. And that's a truer description of it, what's happening than I am angry. So Patanjali Yoga would say practice samadhi. They have 8 steps. Practice that. When the mind is deeply calm and absorbed, this truth will reveal itself. Advaita says, on the contrary, the problem is not the restlessness of the mind. That's the problem, but that's not the real problem. The real problem is we do not know who we are. And we tend to take an object for who we are. So knowledge, a philosophical insight is first. If you reduce the question to meditation or philosophy, which both. And I found, and it's a debate between yogis and Vedantics. I remember when I was in the Himalayas, by the way, Lalita said that I spent years in the Himalayas wandering as a monk. That's not true. Months is more like it. On different occasions, 2 months at a time I would go. But I had interesting experiences. So I met this young person, a yogi. He was a Nepalese monk staying in a cave in Gangotri. And we had some interesting talks. So I asked him, don't you like Vedanta? He's practicing Patanjali Yoga, asana, pranayama, meditation. And his answer was very interesting, how the yogis look at Vedantics. His answer was, I'll tell you in Hindi and then translate. Oh, Vedanta theek hai, Vedanta is good, but वो लोग बहुत बात करते हैं, अनुभूति नहीं. They speak a lot, they give lots of talks, they don't have that experience. So for that experience you need yoga. This is a yogic attitude. The Vedantic attitude is, you are that self. Why would you need a special technique to become aware of yourself? What you have, our problem is we have an ignorance like that 10th person. We are looking in the wrong place. We have to look in the right place. And that shift can be done only by knowledge. The text or the teacher points it out, then we catch it. Yes, meditation is useful to calm down the mind and concentrate. A simple example, you go to college, enroll for a physics course. And the teacher tells you, come to class, listen to the talks, read the textbooks, and then think deeply and sit quietly and think deeply, you'll get it. And if you say, oh, the final thing is sitting quietly. So if I just sit quietly, won't I get it? No! You have to come to class, you have to read it, you have to think for yourself, and then bear down upon it, focus intensely upon it, you will get it. Just sitting quietly is not enough. So, of course, I'm sort of taking the Vedantic side and caricaturing the yogic approach. The yogic approach is not so simple, it's very deep also. And there also, actually, they come upon knowledge. It's called Viveka Khyati. Anyway, is there anything else I wanted to say? I'll come to you. One more thing, because it's an important question. Meditation or knowledge? It can dictate your approach to spiritual life. Answer is both. But in Advaita Vedanta, the primary thing is knowledge. And meditation is a support. And I was very surprised to see and interested to see in Tibetan Buddhism, they have had the same debate several hundred years ago. Is it philosophical insight or is it meditation? They have very advanced techniques of meditation. So is meditation the important thing? Or is this philosophical? They do serious debating also in the Tibetan tradition. Which one will give enlightenment? And there are 2 schools of thought on this. Anything more I wanted to say about this? Meditation and knowledge. All right, I'll come back to yes.
Can I ask a follow-up question very
Yes.
quickly? So taking the yogic approach then, if you calm your mind, I've heard people say that in a calm mind you can see a reflection of the self, of your true self. Do you agree with that?
In a calm mind, in any mind whatsoever.
Right.
The Vedantic approach is that consciousness is, why does the mind seem conscious? Right now the mind seems conscious. When you look at, you feel conscious, right? What is that consciousness then? That's consciousness plus mind. The Vedantins have different models for this. One model is a reflection model. Like the sun is reflected in water. It's not reflected everywhere.
Right.
Sunlight is reflected everywhere, but the image of the sun will not be formed unless you have a proper medium, like water, like a dish of water or a dewdrop in on a flower or something. Similarly, consciousness, the real self, is reflected in the mind, and that reflected consciousness is what we use for our empirical dealing. Talking, speaking, hearing, thinking, understanding. All these are conscious events, and that consciousness is a reflection of the real consciousness, which I am. So it doesn't require a calm mind also, even an active mind. Active mind, calm mind, consciousness is reflected in the mind. As long as the mind is there, it's like a mirror. Whenever you have a mirror, your face is going to get reflected. That's another beautiful example that Advaitins used. What's the difference between a reflected face and your real face? Reflected face means mirror, your face is there in the mirror. Your real face is here. That's the reflected face. But the reflected face has one advantage. You can see it. You can't see your real face. Right? You can only see a reflection of your real face. The reflection is seen. Why? Because the reflection is an object. You can see it different from you. But the real face is not an object. It is the real you. So that's a good example. Real consciousness or pure consciousness is a pure subject. And it is reflected in the mind. But what is reflected in the mind is not a pure self, pure consciousness. Yes.
So, I think it's a good segue. You had mentioned in your last talk that, a lot of people ask the question about, is it just the intellect, or do we also have, is there a role of love, the feeling of love? And you had said, yes, the head and the heart both together is a good combination to understand all of the knowledge. So you had said that the knowledge was the best way of understanding, sort of fathoming the intellect, but love is the best way of understanding.
Yeah.
So, and you had said you would reflect a little bit on that topic in your talk
Right.
today.
Right.
To say how emotions play a role, and it's not just. Pure intellect is good, but intellectual analysis cannot be the only ultimate end, because emotions do play a role.
Right. Let me reflect on that a little bit. But I remembered what I was going to say. I made a comment just now, an observation, that we miss it. It's there, but it needs to be pointed out to us. Otherwise we miss it. That's the pointing out is the role of knowledge. Remember, Advaita Vedanta doesn't say that you can argue and reason your way to God. What the argument in the philosophy does is it points out. Just like the 10th man being pointed out. That's what it does. It points it out to you. Just like the faint star being pointed out. So all of these logical arguments take you to a point after which you have to catch it for yourself. Like the 10th man got it. Oh, I am the 10th man. Like that. So the story which I want to share here before I go to your question is this. A really funny story. You've heard of Mullah Nasruddin. Very funny stories are there of Mullah Nasruddin. So one of the stories is that he would take caravans of donkeys across the borders and with goods and all, and he would sell those things, come back and again and take more across. And the border guards, they said that we know he's smuggling, but what is he smuggling we can't find out. So they would check everything, all the things. Every time he would come with another caravan of donkeys loaded with things, they would check, but everything seemed in order. Years passed in this way, and finally Mullah Nasruddin retired. And one day, he met those guards who had retired by that time, and they were relaxing over a cup of tea maybe, and the guards asked him, tell us, really, we thought so much about it. See, he meditated. He meditated so much about it, he thought so much about it. We know you were smuggling, but what were you smuggling? And the Mullah chuckled and said, donkeys. Donkeys. It was right there. And I love that story because it's actually like that. Swami Vivekananda called it the open secret. It's right here. But the thing is, it has to be pointed out. Once you catch it, you can never make a mistake about it. All right. The role of emotions. I'll make 3 points here. One is, Advaita doesn't stop at pointing out that you are the witness consciousness. How long did we have? 4 to 6, right? We have a little bit of time.
Six, yeah.
So,
We at 6:30 the RT.
6:30, yeah. So we have got 5:40. It does not stop at pointing out that you are the witness consciousness. It goes further. It says that this pure consciousness within you is exactly the same pure consciousness as within him and her and me and everybody else in all beings in this world. They are one consciousness. In the Gita, for example, Sri Krishna says in 13th chapter, Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. Know me alone to be the witness consciousness. This one which we discovered now. Know me alone to be the witness consciousness in all beings. So the one consciousness, shining through all bodies and minds, through all sets of five koshas, is one light. So at that level we are one. At the level of the body we are not one. Each body is different. At the level of our thoughts we are not one. Our thoughts are different. Our personal histories are different. But beyond the person lies that one awareness, one consciousness, our core. There we are one. Love leads to this oneness, because love actually leads to oneness, the feeling of oneness with another person. The person through the path of knowledge realizes this oneness, literally feels, I and you are one reality. Though in body we are different, in personality we are different, but I know that you and I are one. Another example could be the people you meet in your dreams. When you wake up, you realize all of them were imagined by my mind. I was in fact all of those people in the dreams. In the same way, I am the one consciousness in all bodies and minds. That oneness is realized by Vedanta, and that oneness is actually love. When a person is enlightened, the reaction of that person to every other person, every other living being in fact, would be love. And that love is born of not otherness but oneness. That's one point I want to make. Second point I want to make is, even before that, the quest for realizing who I am, it seems to be a very analytical, intellectual quest. But Shankaracharya and Vivek Chudamani calls it bhakti. The quest for the true self, that is also another manifestation of love. It may seem to be very intellectual, but that passion is also love. What in dualistic religion is regarded as love for God, same love is directed towards the higher self inside. That love directed towards the lower self is selfishness. If I love myself as a person, that is selfishness. But love directed to the higher self, where all distinctive elements of self are stripped away. Body, mind, prana, intellect, all are rejected there, all are separated there. Then it's not the individual self you're referring to. Another point I'll make here, and I'll stop there, is that if emotions are not refined, if emotions are not cultivated properly, what will happen is they will hamper your Vedantic quest. What I mean by this is this. Ignorance is at the level of the intellect. Knowledge is at the level of the intellect. So knowledge at the level of the intellect removes ignorance at the level of the intellect. But desire and passion, in Vedantic terms, they are manifestations of the heart, or what we would say emotion. They are not intellectual in that sense. What happens often is, if the emotions are not purified, emotions are not direct, sublimated, if the old crude emotions of anger and hatred and greed, they remain, then what will happen is, intellectually we will get an understanding that there is this such thing is possible, that beyond the body and mind there is a witness consciousness, but we will not really feel anything different. What will happen is, the heart will keep reaching out to the world. I as a person want these things, I like these things, I dislike those things and those people. Likes and dislikes will still remain strong, though the intellectual understanding will be, I am one with everything. Can you see the pull that will come? And it's often actually experienced in the path of knowledge that people say, I understand it intellectually, but then there will be a big but at the end. I understand it intellectually, but it's not really working. What has happened is, at the level of the emotions is still running riot. That's where bhakti comes in. One great teacher of Advaita in the Himalayas, he said, the path of knowledge may not be so much necessary for a devotee, but the path of bhakti is very helpful for a person on the path of knowledge. You see, what is the nature of bhakti? It's the same love. Love of the world, of 100 things in the world. Our love, which is scattered, basically it's desire. It's of the nature of, I want the world. I want this. I want something in the world. Bhakti replaces it by the same I want is there. Instead of the word, God is put there. So same I want is there, but it's now channeled towards God. And God is nothing but this pure consciousness which I'm talking about, this Atman is equal to Brahman, if I cannot yet claim it as I am Brahman, I don't feel that confidence, that reality can be worshipped as God. Basically, God in Advaita Vedanta is that one consciousness in all of us. That if you give it a name and a form and a mythology and worship and rituals, then you can worship it as God. That's the idea of God, Saguna Brahman in Vedanta. Look at what Krishna said. I am the one consciousness in all beings.
So whatever you said today, when you said, well, last time you said we discussed how to, we talked about what is God.
Mhm.
And today you said how do we get to know God.
Yes.
And so all these 5 layers and everything that you discussed today was to get to that state of pure consciousness. Which
Remember, I'm interrupting you. It's not a state of pure consciousness. Vedanta will say that's already there,
Okay.
underlying all states.
Right.
Yeah.
But to know that,
To know myself as that, yes.
To know myself, but yes, that would be Brahman.
Yes, that I am Brahman. Yeah. So that's the Advaitic way of looking at it. One more thing we will do. Tomorrow we have a talk here. So tomorrow's talk is, I put the cart before the horse. So tomorrow's talk is sadhana, spiritual practices. Right now you will ask the question, is that you might think that all this is good. But when we talk about spirituality, don't we talk about meditation and prayer and puja and rituals and devotion and doing good deeds and morals and ethics? You didn't touch any of that. So those are regarded as preliminary in Advaita. All that is taken for granted before you start doing this. So the whole field of sadhana, we'll take a look at that tomorrow. What is spiritual practice? What is the role of spiritual practice, the different kinds of spiritual practices, and what you're supposed to accomplish. All right, there's somebody else who wanted to ask a question. Yes.
Swamiji, you mentioned the deepest kosha being the Anandamaya
Anandamaya. Deepest in the sense? Subtlest. Innermost.
Yes. But we also have the word Ananda show up in Sachidananda. So can you distinguish between the two?
Okay, this is a problem of having well-trained Advaitins in the audience. They'll ask very subtle questions. The question he's asking is, the deepest, the subtlest sheath we talked about is called Anandamaya, pervaded by bliss. And the ultimate nature of reality, according to Advaita Vedanta, and one name used is Ananda, Satchidananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. So what's the difference between the ultimate reality as bliss and bliss as the sheath we talked about? Because clearly you said that I am not the Anandamaya. And yet you end up saying I am Satchidananda. So that Satchidananda, that Ananda there, what I am really, and this Anandamaya, what is the difference? Very big difference. The whole of Advaita lies in this. First difference, that Ananda, and in fact all other pleasures and enjoyment that we have in the world, the happiness which is experienced, it is an object. It is something that is experienced. And the Satchidananda, the more if I immediately say it's not experienced, you feel disappointed. Remember, it's like the sugar which is sweet in itself. It is that which is reflected in the mirror as a reflected face. It is the original Ananda which is reflected in the Panchakosha, including Anandamaya, and through the Anandamaya, through the other koshas, as all our delight. You delight in eating a cookie. You delight in watching a nice movie. You delight in friendship, in nature, in art, in meditation, in devotion. All that delight, from the worldly delight to the spiritual bliss, all of that comes through the Anandamaya kosha. They are all reflections of the real Ananda you are. First difference, that the Anandamaya kosha is an object, real Ananda is a subject. Second, that the Ananda of the Anandamaya kosha is derived from that real Ananda. It's a reflection of that. The reflected face and the real face are not independent. The reflected face cannot exist without the real face. Think about it. It requires a mirror and it requires the real face. Then only it can be reflected. So the Ananda which you experience in the world is a reflection, is a borrowing from your real, original Ananda, your nature. Consider the parallels here quickly. Those who are acquainted with Advaita will immediately get it. Your real self is called existence, consciousness, bliss. All objects which exist in the world, right now, all the things which exist in the world, They borrow existence from your real nature as existence. All conscious experiences which you have, you're seeing now, hearing, smelling, touching, tasting, thinking, remembering, desiring, all of these conscious experiences, they borrow consciousness from the chit, the pure consciousness which you are. And all pleasures and happiness in this world, from the grossest to the most spiritual, to the most intellectual, most aesthetic, all happiness is but a borrowing and a reflection of the ananda that you are. Second point. Third point, the ananda of the Anandamaya Kosha is subject to increase and decrease. The whole Taittiriya Upanishad, there is a whole section on that. How much pleasure or happiness can we have in this world? And it's a beautiful thing. It's called Ananda Mimamsa. If you see that, it's very interesting. It's a calculus of happiness. And it starts with, imagine the happiest person you can imagine. So it gives you like a thought experiment. Imagine a young person. So unfortunately you have to be young to be happy. So that's the conclusion. You have to be young because old persons have lots of problems. So you have to be young. Then it says you have to be, so imagine the richest person in the world. Imagine a highly educated person. Imagine a person who's noble and has all good intentions. So every good thing you could imagine and max it. Put all the levers to the top. Max everything. And the Upanishad says that's one human happiness, one unit of human happiness. And then it builds it up. How can you be happier than that and happier than that? There's a whole thing to that. But all of that is subject to increase and decrease. Whereas the Ananda which you are is actually infinite. It is not subject to increase and decrease. It can be less or more. And the Ananda outside depends on something. You need something outside. You need a cookie, or you need nature, or you need health, or something to manifest that Ananda. So in this way, there are a number of differences between the Ananda of the Anandamaya Kosha and the Ananda of the Ananda which is your real self.
So then along the same vein, like if I'm feeling
I thought I'd answered everything. All right, yeah, tell me.
So that like, if I'm feeling anger or hate, wouldn't that, I mean, why would that not be a reflection of anger and hate that is part of, I mean, that I am?
Yeah. Vedanta would say that we are actually naturally happy, and anger, hate, and all these are obscurations of our natural state. So we are not naturally angry or naturally hateful. We do not, for example, note that we strive to attain happy feelings. We do not strive to attain hateful or angry feelings. It's usually anger comes when desire is frustrated. Kama, krodha, vijayate, Gita, Sri Krishna says. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll come back to you then. I'll give him a chance first.
The next question is, you talked about the real self and the oneness.
Yes.
And the oneness is the God, equal to the God.
Yes.
Why is that been made so difficult for every one of us to understand?
Why is it so difficult? In one sense, it's really difficult. In another sense, actually not very difficult also. And the difficulty is that not that it has been made difficult, we have made it difficult. It's like the person who was, I give the example of a guru. The student comes to the guru, give me freedom, moksha. And the guru gives that student, he tells him that you stay here, keep coming regularly, and slowly I'll teach you. Day after day passes, and the guru makes him cut wood for the fire and clean the cave where the guru lays it, so on and so forth. And the student gets impatient, finally comes to the guru and says, look, unless you teach me about freedom, I'll go to some other guru. The guru said, come tomorrow in the morning. I'll teach you about freedom, moksha. And the student comes very expectant, and he finds there's a big old banyan tree outside the cave. And the guru is holding onto that tightly and shouting, free me, free me, free me. And the student said, just let go. The guru said, precisely, exactly, that is freedom. Now suppose what is difficult about it? If I don't let go, if I expect somebody else to free me, how difficult it will be. They'll have to prise off every finger by finger because I am holding it. Vivekananda said, thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. Let go thy hold, sannyasi, hold. Say Om Tat Sat. So the difficulty is actually on our side, though it does not seem to be. We have solidified it by lifetimes of habit and practice. So the opposite practice is sadhana. And that's why it seems so difficult. And in one sense, it's Advaita makes it seem very easy. Why? Because it is here. It is now. It is yourself. What could be easier? Vivekananda called it the open secret. In one perspective, it is very easy. Another perspective, practically speaking, it is quite difficult.
So, it's something similar to what he asked.
Yeah.
But it is, my question was, it could be a little tautological, I don't know, but I'm thinking that if after death, when the body is gone, when we have given up on the body,
The physical body.
You realize, you have no choice but to realize that you are never the body.
Yeah.
The body is something you just embody.
Yes.
So when you die, this realization will automatically dawn very
Yes.
easily.
Yes.
So why is there such a struggle and striving when you're alive to know this? If it is part of the cycle, it will happen regardless.
You are saying that you should become enlightened at death, because if you actually have a conscious experience of surviving death, you should see that I'm not the body, so I'm apart from the body and I cannot die. That's what you're asking?
Sort of.
Yeah.
So, yes, in very simply put, maybe that's what I'm asking. But what I'm saying is, if that is bound to happen at
Yeah.
some point in time,
Yeah.
that it will happen, that you will realize, is there a real pressing need to understand that in this particular time frame and space?
Right. So there are two questions. If I die and if I actually somehow consciously experience dying, which different religions seem to say that you will experience it. In that case, wouldn't you be enlightened? You realize you're not. But you look at the Panchakosha paradigm, the paradigm that we use now. All that you would feel is that I am not the physical body. But that still leaves the prana, that leaves the mind and the intellect, that leaves the person intact. Right? I'm normally, even now, I don't exactly consider myself to be the physical body. I feel embodied in this. But I feel that I am a conscious entity in this physical body. At that time, I feel I am this conscious entity apart from the physical body. I'm giving a hypothetical here. That's not enlightenment, because I'm still bound by a number of objective sheets. Consider this. You don't even have to wait for death. All of us have experiences of continuing as a conscious entity without reference to the physical body. You know when? Sleep, a dream. We don't pay attention to that. What, after all, is a dream? I experience a world and I experience myself with a body in the dream and interacting with other people, right? When I wake up, I call it a dream. I realize it was all manifested by me. But notice one interesting fact about the dream. I continued subjectively as an independent, as a conscious entity. I continued. I had experiences without any reference to the physical body which is lying there on the bed. I was not even thinking about it. I did not remember it. And it is possible. That means, logically speaking, our experience of life is not tied to this physical body. That does not help us in becoming enlightened.
So our goal is to be enlightened.
Yes.
And can you define what
That enlightenment would be to realize oneself as not the body, not the mind, the consciousness underlying body and mind, and that oneness of consciousness underlying all bodies and minds. That one realization, that is, I am Brahman. That would be enlightenment. Now your question is, what's the hurry? Vivekananda's answer was no hurry. As long as you don't feel the need for it, there's no need. And it will not happen also unless we feel the need for it. But then your question, the broader question will be, what is the project here? Right? Religion has these two aspects. One aspect is a temple, church or mosque, where you go and pray for things in the world. It's understandable. I want good grades in my exam. I want a good job, or I want health, or nothing specific. Let things be well with me. That's mostly why people go to temples and churches, a kind of, or solace, somebody to depend upon in times of distress. And it's all good. That is something, function which religion has served. But what we are talking about doesn't seem to be that. We are talking about something else. We are talking about what Buddha called nirvana, or what Vedanta calls moksha. What is the need for this? What is this project? The project is this. We suffer. Life is dissatisfying. No matter how we struggle, At no point can we or anybody else in this world, in any time of history, say that I have truly attained profound, lasting peace and happiness. This profoundly dissatisfactory nature of life is what Buddha called dukkha, suffering. Now the question is it possible to totally, completely overcome this? Completely transcend suffering? I'm using the word transcend. There's a reason why. But overcome suffering, transcend suffering, is it possible? Spirituality says yes. I'm not even saying Advaita. Every religion in the world, they have terms for it. Moksha, Nirvana, Kaivalya, salvation. So they have terms for it. It is possible to finally attain a state, an original state of lasting happiness and bliss. And the proof of that is, in every religion, in every period of history, there have been men and women who have said, yes, we have attained to peace and happiness. And it's only people who are in this track. I'm not saying Advaita Vedanta, who are spiritual seekers, who seem to have claimed this. So this is the project. It is at its heart no different from what anybody in the world is doing. Seek it wisely, you're called spiritual. Seek it otherwisely, worldly. But you're seeking the same lasting peace and happiness, trying to overcome suffering. This is the project.
So ultimately, moksha is freedom from the cycle of birth and life.
All right, I didn't go there. Why? Because when I say moksha is freedom from suffering, in fact, that's how it's defined. Vedanta, what's the goal? Moksha, what happens at moksha? Atyantika dukkha nivritti. Complete, total cessation of sorrow or transcendence of sorrow. Paramananda prapti, attainment of ultimate bliss. So this is moksha. But you are right, in a general sense, in the Indic religions, Hinduism, all schools of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, moksha is understood as transcending the cycle of birth and death. But transcending the cycle of birth and death, what does it achieve? It achieves exactly this thing, transcending suffering. So this is the general way of stating it. Why I didn't go there first straight away is that in Abrahamic religions, you don't have this cycle of birth and death. So it doesn't make sense to many people in this country.
Right. No, so ultimately, moksha, whether you believe in the cycle of birth and death or not, is the attainment of eternal bliss.
Eternal bliss and transcendence of sorrow. Yes. That is the goal. That's the purpose. And this has been discussed. For example,
To be one with the source.
One with the source, you have already imported Advaita metaphysics into it. But a Buddhist might not put it that way. A Jaina will not put it that way. A devotee of God, say a Christian mystic or a Muslim mystic, will not put it that way. To be one with the source. It's oneness and non-duality. It's a non-dual approach to Vedanta. I would say that. I'm okay with this. But the general thing is everybody aims at this overcoming suffering and attainment of deep happiness. That's the general answer to which is something that will be satisfying to everybody. This is achieved by realizing your oneness with Brahman, that you are Brahman, from an Advaitic point of view, from our school's point of view. Last question, I think we have run out of time. Okay,
Can we attain moksha with Bhakti Marga?
Yes, tomorrow we'll talk. Good, you asked this question, a good segue into tomorrow's talk. Bhakti, karma, meditation, these are things you talk about when you talk about spirituality. So we'll talk about that tomorrow.
Yeah. Is it going to be here, Swamiji?
Yes, is it going to be here?
Just here.
All right,
Thank you.
let me do a peace chant. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna. I pray to the Lord of all religions, the Lord embodied here, that may the Lord bless us with this intuitive realization, or maybe blessed with real spirituality in this life itself.